Hey guys, welcome back to another Anti-Guru. And today is an interesting one because today comes from a request that I've had from some good friends of mine. And they said, John, can you do us an Anti-Guru video on the three biggest misnomers, the three biggest fallacies that you see as a planning consultant when you've got people assessing applications? I said, that's a very big question, but I'll give it a go. So here we are, and in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to go through my three biggest fallacies that I see regularly by applicants, by prospective developers in assessing development sites. Join me in the next couple of minutes after the groovy tunes when we'll go through that. And if you, of course, if you're liking these videos, like, comment, subscribe. Let's get right into it. Okay, so the three biggest fallacies, that's four, three biggest fallacies in assessing applications. Right, where do I start? Now this is unscripted, I haven't got a script, I'm doing this completely from my own memory, but it should be quite interesting. And the first one, by a country mile, is this: my neighbour's got it, or a bloke down the road has got it, or my relative who lived in a different county was able to get it, or something akin to that. The idea that because someone else has got what you want, you can have it too. Now, I see this all the way through the spectrum, literally all the way through the spectrum, from tower blocks all the way down to flat conversions. My next door neighbour's got something that I want, but the council is saying no for some reason, to dormer windows, to whatever. I see it literally everywhere. And it revolves around the idea of planning precedent. Now, planning precedent is incredibly difficult to cite correctly, incredibly difficult. It has to be the same authority. So the next borough, the next town, the next village might be a different authority. An identical site. Now, when I say identical, I mean down to the size of the land, the property you've got on there. Precedent only really works if you've got an estate of identical properties. So an identical site, an identical circumstance, phone going off, adds authenticity. An identical circumstance. So an identical arrangement to your neighbours, an identical arrangement to the road, to the character and appearance of the street scene. Everything has to be the same. The same authority and within 12 months. Now, the 12 months is critical because, as we've seen and understood over the course of the last, I don't know, 3 months, planning law and practice can change on a heartbeat. And that's the thing. We look out when we're thinking about planning precedent for things that are called material changes in circumstance. Material changes in circumstance are there, ladies and gentlemen, dear viewer, I'm talking to you, to deal with what happens if things happen. So what happens if permitted development changes, if we have a change in government, if we have a change in policy, if the council suddenly uprates or uplifts their national floor space requirements, or if they suddenly change their HMO requirements on the fly, which councils do. Material changes in circumstance. That's why you can't cite planning precedent successfully. That's why the courts have said it is incredibly difficult to cite planning precedent successfully. And that's why it's the first greatest misnomer inside the planning system. Number two follows the line of, well, it had planning permission, so I should be able to get that again. Now, planning permissions elapse, they go off. I have a sell-by date on them, and it's 3 years from the date of decision or 3 years from the date of the appeal. All right, 3 years from the date of decision, 3 years from the date of the appeal. The longer a planning permission has been off, the more likely it is that there has been that material change in circumstance. Right? The longer it has gone off, the more likely that something has changed. In fact, the golden rule when you're looking at planning permissions in reality is you want planning permissions that are still alive, that are still working with you, that are still functional. You don't want planning permissions that are old and have gone off and are dated. So the reality of this material change in circumstance argument is quite detailed and quite deep, and has an effect on the second misnomer, which is, it's had planning permission, I can go and get that again. No, you can't. You have to assess what the material change in circumstance is. And I see, as a planning consultant, examples of this on a weekly basis. On a weekly basis, where people bring me a lapsed planning permission and say, well, it was granted in 2011. Can I get it again? Don't know. Maybe. It's a simple answer. Don't know. Maybe. Let me check it. And lo and behold, because it is not national standards compliant, because it doesn't comply with new parking standards, because it might very well be the case that the policy has changed fundamentally, something throws it out. Something throws it out. What I saw a couple of weeks ago was just that. Do the units comply with the national standards? Oh dear, they don't. None of them are over 30 square meters. Approved in 2011, cannot be approved today. That is a very common misnomer that assumes planning law and thought remain static. It doesn't. It changes and grows over time. And so the second biggest misnomer is, just because you've got planning permission in the past does not make it clear that you will get planning permission again. The third misnomer in our list, and I'm going to be really pointed on this, is very, very simple. The third misnomer is, I can work everything on standard pricing, on standard timings. I can make assumptions based on what the national regulation says, or based on a standard set of figures that I've been given by my guru. Now, we see this a lot. We see this an awful, awful lot. It's quite scary how often we see this. The national requirement, or the national guideline, it's not even a requirement, a national guideline for planning permission is that 80% of applications should be done in 8 weeks if they're minors, below 10 units, and should be done in 13 weeks if they're majors, above 10 units, right? That is a massive misnomer. You cannot rely upon that. And the reason why you cannot rely upon that is that you have no stick to hit the council with. Once you go beyond the 8-week period, you're stuck. And I'll explain why. Assuming you go beyond the 8-week period, you may make an appeal against non-determination, which will send your application off to the planning inspectorate for 6 months minimum at the moment. Well, that's not a big stick to hit them with. Alternatively, you may wait 6 months and then you may write to them under the ministerial guarantee and say, I want my planning fees back, but it doesn't make your application go any faster. The only thing to make applications go faster is by working with the planning authority to make them go faster, to help them make them go faster. So reality is that basing an assumption, say on funding, on bridging, on 8 weeks is a fallacy, massive, massive fallacy. Planning applications do not right now take 8 weeks. That's simply not correct. You're lucky if your planning application for a minor less than 10 units takes 12 weeks. Very lucky if it takes 12 weeks. And then the second part of this fallacy is my guru said I could build everything at £120 a square foot. Wow. My guru said I could build everything at £120 a square foot, and therefore I've done all my numbers based on £120 a square foot. The national average, and I'm using BCIS for this, which is the Building Costs Service, it's produced by REBA, is £190 a square foot. Right? Now you can find out for yourself how much pounds per square foot is going on in your area. Your architect should have access to BCIS. They should also have access to the RICS Red Book. And you can go to places like the Association of British Insurers to find out what the cost of rebuild is. So you can work it out. It is not £120 a square foot. Now, our cost of rebuild down at Raglan, we know it's £130 a square foot. And we validated that by ringing the council and asking them what they put their viability criteria on. And they are presently using £130 a square foot for new build and £160 a square foot for conversions. Conversions are more expensive in Plymouth than it is to new build. That's what they're currently using. And they're using that for viability assessment. So reality is, if your guru is giving you a figure, validate the figure, and validate the figure for your area. This is not to do as I do. This is I'm going to check. That's the third misnomer. I'm sure you can see that all three will ultimately lead to a problem. Right? The first will ultimately lead to a flawed assumption. The second will ultimately lead to you going overtime on bridging. And the third will ultimately screw your figures up. Those are the three biggest misnomers I see as a planning consultant day in, day out. Tell me, what are yours? What are your big misnomers that you see when you are looking at development projects or looking at failed development projects? Like, comment, subscribe. I hope that's been useful. Next one I'm doing is a request straight from this channel. One of our channel viewers has requested some information on affordable housing. I'm going to provide it. I'm more than happy to do that. So I hope you'll join me for the next one. Have a great day, everyone. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next Anti-Guru.